listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, students. Now today we're going to talk about some very practical tips to help you improve your speaking. Now, before we start, I just want you to consider a few things, all right? And I'm just going to give you a few examples of very successful people, very famous people that had difficulties when they were younger, okay? Like, for example, Beethoven, the famous violin player, when he was a young kid, when he picked up the violin, he was really clumsy with it, and it was really awkward, and he didn't really excel with the violin when he was younger. In fact, his teacher called him a very hopeless composer. So just bear that in mind. Then Charles Darwin, he's got a fantastic story. His dad thought he was a failure. He wanted to send him to the schools, but Darwin didn't really excel at the schools. His mind was always wandering, and he says in his diary, he said that everybody thought that he had a very below standard IQ. Basically, they thought he was pretty stupid, all right? And then he goes on to develop the theory of evolution, okay? Here's another example. Walt Disney was fired in his first job for a lack of ideas, okay? He also went bankrupt about 2 or 3 times until finally he developed Disneyland, and as they say, the rest is history. He went on to make millions and millions and millions. Here's another one, very famous one. Thomas Edison, the father of electricity. His teacher said he was too stupid to learn anything, okay? But he persisted. He kept on going. He kept on doing it, and he became one of the world's greatest inventors the world has ever seen. So what I'm trying to say is stick with it, be persistent, put in the hours, keep your tenacity up, be unstoppable, and eventually you will get there. It's just a case of putting in the hours. And yeah, everything is difficult at first. You know, in fact, I was speaking just last night. I was speaking with the girl, and she's a journalist. And I asked her, how's it going? She goes, I hate my job. I don't want to do this. I want a location independent job, and all of this. And I said, well, why don't you do it? And she goes, because I'm not a native English speaker. And I was like, well, that shouldn't really stop you. You know, most people, they're more interested in the content. Like in her example, she was a journalist, so she could just publish online, but in her native language or even in English. And I just explaining that her readers will be more interested in the content than they will in the actual structure or in the actual grammar of her writing. And she was surprised by that. But the message I want to say is that because she was worried, she didn't even try. She didn't even step out there and give it a go. You know, we've got to have the courage to make mistakes and to move forward. And that's the only way you can learn, is by making mistakes. You know, we're not born perfect. I wasn't born an English teacher. I've learned these skills. And just like you weren't born with your native language, you learnt it, so there's no reason why you can't learn English to a band 7 level. Now then, let's get started. This podcast is all about practical tips to help you prepare for the IELTS speaking test. If you go to the website, IELTSPodcast.com, or just put into Google podcast, IELTS podcast 120 speaking tips or practical speaking tips, you'll find it, and there you'll be able to find a big PDF which is full of cue cards which you can download and you can practice, and they'll be very useful for what I'm just about to tell you now. So the first thing I want to introduce to you is the idea of practicing in private. And of course you've probably heard this before, but I'm going to give you a technique, I'm going to give you some instructions on how you can do it more effectively. So the first step that I think would be valuable for you is to get a list of potential cue cards, okay, and you can get them from IELTSPodcast.com if you just find this this blog post, and you can download the PDF with all the questions, not all the questions, but about 20 sample cue cards, okay, and then go to a quiet room, stand up, and just practice answering these questions, okay? And while you're doing this, you can check for your pronunciation, all right? Any words that you might not be sure about, you can check online and find the word and how to pronounce it. You can practice your stress and intonation, okay? Saying the words together in a sentence might be simple, but you need to make sure you're following the correct intonation, okay, and putting the right stress on the words or syllables. Here is two quick tips. Firstly, when you're answering a question, when you're asking a question, generally you go up at the end like that, and when you're making sort of like an affirmative statement, you go down at the end, and it makes it sound more authoritative or more more confident in your answer. So those two things are worth considering, and that's true in any language, which is, I think, kind of amazing. Now, the other thing that you'd probably want to just check is the Yeah, I mean, you could even record yourself and just check afterwards that what was coming out of your mouth was what you actually wanted to say. Now, the second point I want to emphasize is fluency. Okay, and what you let's see. So to get fluent, I'm giving you a terrible example here. What I want to say is that be careful about saying and and things like that. There's two ways you can get rid of those. The first one is you can use fillers. You can say, well, to be honest, or let me see, or with regards to that, I would say my best friend is probably David, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Assuming we got a question about your best friend. Now, then the other method is just to speak more in English. And there's two mini tips here. The first one, jump on Skype and fill it up with €10 of credit and just start ringing businesses in the UK or in Australia. It won't cost you that much, and just ask them about the products, pretend you're a customer. The other one, probably slightly more more common. You can go to the language exchanges. When I was in Australia, I went to one, and it was good fun, and you get practice. And also, I used to go to these a lot in Spain, but I stopped because it was the same boring questions. However, and these questions would be, oh, where are you from? Oh, what's your name? Oh, how long have you been in Spain for? Blah, blah, blah. And I had to say the same over and over again. But this is perfect for the IELTS because you get into the routine and it becomes really easy, yeah. And you can start to find these. I'm from Japan. Just jump online, put Facebook for 2 years language exchange, or practicing you can either download that app, go to university, whatever. But it's very and similar, download the app and then look for the language exchange. What happens in the IELTS, of course, especially in the bigger cities and all that. And however, it's pretty easy. It's good. So the next practice, the next big tip I want to share is to practice in front of a mirror. Okay. And this is really quite an interesting technique because you probably see stuff that you've never seen before. Okay, so I know that when I speak, I use my hands a lot. Okay, and I didn't know that before, but it only through people telling me, through people saying it, that I actually realized. And if I'd have done it in front of the mirror, I'd have realized a lot quicker. So you're going to find mannerisms and expressions that you weren't aware of. The other advantage, and these mannerisms might range between your posture, okay, how you sit influences the way you project your voice. And there's a really good TED talk about this, and it's all about confidence, and it's basically saying that your body language dictates how you're feeling, okay, rather than vice versa. Because I think the common belief is like, oh, I feel down, so I'm going to sort of like slouch and put my shoulders up, okay, or put my shoulders in. However, scientists have found that you can change your feelings by changing your body language. So if you sit in sort of like with your back upright, you're going to sound a lot stronger, and you're also going to make yourself feel a lot more confident. Okay, so this is really important. Second thing of facial expressions. Okay, I find, if I was doing the exam, I would be smiling, and I'd just be open and try and be as relaxed as possible. Okay, and if I had to use lenses or glasses, I would wear them so I wasn't squinting. When squinting is when you're closing your eyes. In fact, there's a funny story about that. I wear glasses, yeah, and sometimes I'm quite forgetful, so I won't wear them. And one afternoon, we were down at the beach, and when I squint, when I close my eyes to sort of like focus properly, I look really angry, and I had no idea about this. And my friend said, "Why are you so angry? Why are you looking around at everybody so angry?" And I wasn't angry at all, and I was surprised. But then I realized that, I'm sort of like closing my eyes and squinting to focus and to look at all the scenery, we can say. And so I quickly realized, right, it's time to take my contact lenses or my glasses down to the beach, so I'm not giving all the attractive girls nasty looks, because that's what was pretty much happening. Okay, and then the third point is your gestures. Okay, how you're controlling your hands. Maybe you're moving them around quite fast, and it might be a bit unnerving. Okay, so just do your speech in front of the mirror and just check, see how things, just see how you look. Okay, now another very important tip is to practice with an audience. And this is similar to practicing in front of the mirror, okay? But most of all, you're going to get used to how long you can speak for, how long your answers must be, and keeping eye contact, and all of these points, okay? When I was younger, just another story, I used to have real difficulty maintaining eye contact. I used to be quite nervous, and my eyes would be moving all over the place. And I know this is a common problem for some students as well. And one technique that I found was just to focus on a point between the eyes, like in between the eyebrows, and just focus on that point, okay? Or just focus on the lips, and then just sort of like when they finish speaking, just sort of like nod my head and then look away and start talking. Okay, so that was just one personal technique I got. So let's see. So when you're practicing in front of someone, you can also get feedback. Okay, you can get feedback on your volume. You're speaking loud enough? Are you speaking soft? You can get feedback on the pace. Do you speed up a little bit when you get excited and miss important points? Are you speaking with clarity? Okay, and I'm not bragging. However, a lot of foreign, non-native English speakers have said, "Oh wow, you're the first English person I understand." And the reason they understand me is because I vocalize a lot. Okay, I try to pronounce every single word as it should be, without, without jumping around and without shortening it, and it sounds very different to when I'm speaking with my friends. When I'm speaking with my friends, it's a little bit faster, and I don't pronounce maybe the end syllable. But when I'm in teaching mode or in podcast mode, I will make sure I pronounce every single word, syllable, and my intonation will be perfect. And here's another tip. Open your mouth a lot wider and you'll see a very quick jump in your pronunciation. Okay? So those are the tips. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this before. However, with regards to the speaking, when I'm saying practice face-to-face, now the Speaking Confidence course available at sentenceguide.com, now you get a Skype test with a tutor, one-on-one, and they'll go through and just give you an overview of some of the mistakes, some of the your good points and what you need to practice on. And yeah, and if you feel comfortable with that tutor, perhaps you can go on and book some classes with them. So it's totally your call. Okay? So that's just one thing to bear in mind. And yeah, thank you for listening to the podcast. And remember what I said at the beginning. Okay? I mentioned all those famous people who all had a lot of difficulties when they were starting out, and they eventually came to be a massive, massive success in their field. Just like you will if you keep trying, if you maintain your tenacity, and just keep practicing. All right? Have a fantastic day. All the best.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.